scoping meeting for this application. We will be getting started in just a few minutes, right at 2 p.m. So thanks in advance for joining us today. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome. You are tuning in to the remote public scoping meeting for the DeWitt Clinton Park North application, also known as 801 11th Avenue and 629 West 54th Street. For ease, I will continue to refer to this application as DeWitt Clinton Park North. The City Environmental Quality Review, or CEQR number for the proposal is 25 DCP 049M. My name is Stephanie Shalou, and I'm the director of the New York City Department of City Planning's Environmental Assessment and Review Division, or EARD. Evren Olker-Kajar, deputy director, and Tom Smith, senior program manager for neighborhood studies and special projects, will co-host today's meeting. In the event of any technical challenges on my end, Evren or Tom will take over hosting this meeting on my behalf. We appreciate everyone making time to join this meeting today, and we do appreciate your patience if we run into any technical difficulties. I also want to emphasize that we will hear from everyone who wishes to speak today, and the meeting will remain open until everyone who wishes to speak has had an opportunity to do so. We also welcome written comments on this item and will accept written testimony through 5 p.m. on Monday, February 10th, 2025, and we provide written comments with the same attention and consideration as any comments that will be provided live today at this meeting. Next slide. Thank you. Again, we will now proceed to the public scoping meeting for the DeWitt Clinton Park North application. For the record, let me note that the City Environmental Quality Review, or CEQR, application number again is 25DCP049M. Today's date is January 30th, 2025, and the time is approximately 2:02 p.m. Next slide. Again, I'm Stephanie Shalou, Director of EARD with the New York City Department of City Planning, and I will be chairing today's scoping meeting. The Department of City Planning is acting on behalf of the City Planning Commission as lead agency for this application. As the lead agency, the department will be responsible for overseeing the preparation and review of the proposal's Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS. Next slide. Joining me are several colleagues from the Department of City Planning, as I mentioned, Evren Olker-Kajar, Deputy Director of EARD, and Tom Smith, Senior Advisor for Neighborhood Studies and Special Projects in the Community Planning and Engagement Division. Andrew Martini is the Environmental Assessment and Review Division Project Manager from the department's Manhattan office. We also have Abigail Ryder and Andy Cantu of the Borough Office team. We also have several DCP staff members working in the background to ensure that today's meeting runs smoothly, so many thanks to them. Next slide. Together, we're here to receive your comments on the draft scope of work for the DeWitt Clinton Park North proposal. The draft scope of work identifies the subjects to be analyzed in the upcoming Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or DEIS, and describes the methodologies that will be used in those analyses. The draft scope of work materials are available on the Department of City Planning's website. Next slide. The purpose of today's scoping meeting is to allow for public participation in the preparation of the DEIS at the earliest stage possible in the environmental review process. Specifically, scoping allows the public to help shape the DEIS before it is written. Toward that end, the department as lead agency will receive verbal testimony on the draft scope of work today from elected officials, government agencies, representatives from the local community board, and the public. As I mentioned, we also welcome written comments on the draft scope of work, and those comments can be submitted through Monday, February 10th, 2025 at 5 p.m. Next slide. At the end of the written comment period, the department will review all comments, those that we hear today, as well as any written comments that we receive. After carefully reviewing all of these comments, the department will decide what changes, if any, need to be made to the draft scope of work, and we will issue a final scope of work. It's the final scope of work that serves as the basis for preparation of the DEIS. Next slide. Today marks the beginning of the written comment period, as I mentioned, for the draft scope of work, and no decisions will be made today regarding the scope. The purpose of today's meeting, again, is to allow the public to provide their comments about the draft scope of work, allow the department to hear those comments, and hear all voices that are interested in being heard today. Next slide. I'll now focus on the structure of today's meeting, which will be divided into 3 parts. During the first part, the applicant team will provide a brief presentation of the DeWitt Clinton Park North proposal, followed by a brief summary of the environmental review's draft scope of work. This will be about 20 minutes. During the second part of the meeting, the department will hear testimony from elected officials, government agencies, and members representing the community board. During the third and final part of the meeting, we'll receive testimony from members of the general public. Next slide. On to a few logistics. If you do wish to speak and plan to access the meeting online using a computer, tablet, or smartphone, please remember to register online on the DeWitt Clinton Park North public scoping meeting page on the NYC Engage portal. You can access this at www.nyc.gov/NYC Engage. A link to join us and provide your testimony will be emailed to you after you've completed the registration process on the NYC Engage portal, and you'll be added to our speakers list. Next slide. When it is your turn to speak, your name will be called and you will be promoted to panelist. This will allow you to unmute your microphone and the ability to turn on your camera if you wish. There will be a short period that it appears you're no longer in the meeting. Don't be alarmed, you'll automatically rejoin the meeting as a panelist. At that time, you'll be asked to convey your remarks. To allow to hear from everyone who wishes to speak, we ask you to limit your remarks to 3 minutes. If you're joining us online, a 3-minute countdown clock will be visible on the screen to you. And at the 3-minute mark, your time will expire and we will ask you to conclude your remarks. Please note that it does take a moment to promote panelists, so we ask for your patience. And if you do choose to turn on your camera, you will be visible to those in this meeting. Next slide. An additional note of instruction for those of you joining us by phone. If you wish to provide testimony via telephone, please select *9 when I prompt you to do so. Please listen for me to call out the last 3 digits of your phone number, at which point you'll be given the temporary ability to share your testimony. You'll need to press *6 to unmute your telephone and we'll be able to hear you speak at this meeting. And when your testimony is complete or your 3 minutes have expired, whichever comes first, you'll need to press *6 again to mute yourself. We encourage everyone to dial in participants who do wish to provide testimony to register using our dial-in participant hotline that was visible at the beginning of the screen and available on NYC Engage. Note that muting and unmuting speakers does take a moment, so we appreciate your patience. Next slide. On to time limits. Speakers of the general public are given 3 minutes to provide their testimony. There are a few exceptions to this limit. Elected officials, for example, are given the courtesy of jumping to the front of the queue and are not limited to 3 minutes. For anyone, one of you joining us on the live stream and you wish to testify, please be mindful of potential background noise during your testimony. Make sure that the live stream is muted before you begin your testimony to avoid hearing an echo. Next slide. If you wish to submit written testimony, either instead of or in addition to any verbal testimony, it can be submitted to us at the Department of City Planning. The mailing address for these comments is 120 Broadway, 31st floor, New York, New York. Attention, Stephanie Shalou. We also have an email address set up to receive comments on this proposal if you prefer. The email for that is 25dcp049m_dl@planning.nyc.gov as shown on the screen here. This information can also be found on the NYC Engage portal and the DCP website at nyc.gov/planning. Again, as a reminder, written comments will be accepted through Monday, February 10th, 2025 at 5 p.m. Next slide. All right, we will now move on to the application. Again, if you have any questions, please visit nyc.gov/NYC Engage for instructions on how to participate or provide testimony if you missed our instructions at the top of this meeting. I will now turn it over to Wesley O'Brien of the applicant team, who will be followed by the environmental consultant to summarize the draft scope of work. Wesley, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Wesley O'Brien of Fried Frank, Land Use Counsel to the applicants. As Stephanie mentioned, we are here to discuss the environmental review that will be conducted in connection with 2 rezonings and special permits. These actions are being proposed in order to facilitate the development of 2 new mixed-use, predominantly residential buildings, providing affordable housing pursuant to the mandatory inclusionary housing program. These actions, additionally, these actions will allow for the purchase of unused floor area from the Hudson River Park, which will generate funding for repairs and renovations of the park. Next slide. The 2 sites are 629 West 54th Street and 801 11th Avenue, each shown here in red. The sites are separately owned, with the 54th Street site owned by 76012 LLC, which is an affiliate of Friedland Properties, and the 11th Avenue site being owned by 801 11th Avenue LLC, which is an affiliate of the Chapman Group. Accordingly, there will be 2 independent land use applications filed, but as reflected in the draft scope of work, the potential effects of the 2 projects will be jointly reviewed in a single EIS. Next slide. The 54th Street site outlined to the left is currently mapped in an M24 zoning district within sub-area C2 of the Special Clinton District. The 11th Avenue site, outlined in red to the right, is currently in an M23 district within sub-area C1 of the Special Clinton District. Note that the rezoning area around the 11th Avenue site, outlined in green, includes a small portion of the adjacent Lot 23. Although this area would be rezoned under the proposed actions, special regulations would continue to apply the existing M23 zoning on the adjacent site unless it is subsequently subject to its own special permit. Next slide. This slide shows the existing conditions at the 54th Street site, where there is currently a 6-story, 82-foot tall commercial auto dealership building constructed in 1903. Next slide. This slide shows the existing conditions at the 11th Avenue site, where there are currently 2 buildings that have been operated as a single commercial auto dealership, including a 2-story, approximately 50-foot tall building and a 3-story, approximately 35-foot tall building constructed in 1920. This site is currently vacant. Next slide. This slide lists the proposed zoning actions that would facilitate the new developments. Starting with the zoning map amendments, each site is proposed to be rezoned to C47, and the development sites and the granting sites in Hudson River Park are all proposed to be mapped within the special Hudson River Park district. Next, the zoning text amendments. The zoning text amendments will define the granting and receiving sites within the special Hudson River Park district regulations and will designate the development sites as mandatory inclusionary housing areas. This will require, for example, that 25% of the residential floor area be affordable at an average of 60% AMI, or that 30% of the residential floor area be affordable at an average of 80% of the AMI. Text amendments will also allow for auto repair uses to be included in connection with auto showroom uses, and will modify the floor area regulations to allow more than 12 FAR residential use to be developed in conjunction with the special permits. The special permits will also be sought to allow for the transfer of approximately 84,349 square feet of floor area from Hudson River Park to the 54th Street site and 64,392 square feet of floor area to the 11th Avenue site. Finally, the special permits will also request modifications to the various bulk regulations. Next slide. Next slide, please. There we go. This slide provides a comparison of the permitted uses and floor area ratios under the existing and proposed zoning. Under the existing zoning, commercial and manufacturing uses are allowed on the sites. Under the proposed zoning, residential and community facility uses would also be permitted, but manufacturing uses would be prohibited. Also, under the existing zoning, the maximum floor area ratio permitted within the M23 district, which is the 11th Avenue site, is 2.0. The maximum floor area ratio permitted within the M24 district, which is the 54th Street site, is 5.0. Pursuant to the proposed C4 7 and the special Hudson River Park district regulations, the maximum floor area ratio would be 10.0 or 12.0 with the provision of mandatory inclusionary housing. With the special permit to allow floor area to be transferred from Hudson River Park, the maximum floor area ratios on these sites would then be increased by 20% to 14.4. Next slide. The potential floor area granting sites within Hudson River Park are outlined on this map and are Chelsea Piers, which includes Piers 59, 60, and 61 and the associated head house, and Piers 81, 83, and 98. Next slide. Together, these actions would allow for the transfer of approximately 148,741 square feet of unused zoning floor area from these sites. It is anticipated that these transfers would generate funding for the repair and rehabilitation of Pier 76 or other capital projects within the Community District 4 section of Hudson River Park. Next slide. Turning now to the development sites. The proposed project at the 54th Street site would include 421,743 square feet of residential floor area, which would provide a total of 617 dwelling units, including between 154 and 185 permanently affordable units pursuant to the mandatory inclusionary program. The proposed project would also include 84,349 square feet of commercial floor area, which is anticipated to be developed as an auto showroom. Next slide. As shown here in elevation, the proposed project would include 3 stories of auto showroom use in the commercial base, with the residential floors located above. The building would have a maximum building height of 565 feet, including the bulkhead. Next slide. Here, the 54th Street project's massing is shown in axonometric view, along with other nearby buildings for context. Next slide. And this slide provides a rendering from a similar aerial view. Next slide. And finally, in this rendering, you can see the 3-story auto showroom in the commercial base with the residential portions above. The residential lobby faces the park and is located to the right-hand side of the site. Next slide. Turning now to the 11th Avenue site. The proposed project at this site would include 321,958 square feet of residential floor area, which would provide a total of 477 dwelling units, including between 119 and 143 units of permanently affordable housing pursuant to the mandatory inclusionary housing program. The proposed project would include 64,392 square feet of commercial floor area, which is also anticipated to be developed as an auto showroom. Next slide. As shown here in elevation, the proposed building would also include 3 stories of auto showroom use in the commercial base, and the residential floors would be located above. The proposed building would have a maximum height of 525 feet, including the bulkhead. Next slide. As before, the proposed massing is shown in an axonometric view with other nearby buildings providing context. Next slide. Again, here's a rendering of a similar aerial view. Next slide. This is a rendering of the upper portion of the building looking west towards the Hudson River. Next slide. And finally, in this rendering, we are looking northwest across 11th Avenue and can see the main residential lobby entrance in the foreground. Next slide. And now I will turn it over to Jason Diaz from VHB to discuss the environmental review and its analysis framework.
Thank you, Wesley. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Diaz, and I'm a senior environmental planner with VHB, the environmental consultant for the EIS. The framework for the EIS is based on the guidelines of the City Environmental Quality Review, or CEQR, technical manual. The EIS, positive declaration, and draft scope of work were published on December 30th, 2024. And the draft scope of work sets the framework for the EIS, including a description of the methodologies for the technical areas that will be studied in the EIS. As described earlier, this scoping meeting is an opportunity for the public to comment on the draft scope of work. The feedback received on the draft scope of work will be incorporated in a final scope of work and will also be reflected in the draft EIS. Next slide, please. Consistent with the CEQR technical manual's guidelines, the EIS will analyze the difference between the no action and with action conditions in the analysis year of 2029. The no action condition is the future condition that would be anticipated on the 2 development sites and in the surrounding area without the projects in 2029. For both development sites, the 2029 no action condition would be the continuation of the existing buildings. At 629 West 54th Street, the existing auto dealership uses would remain, and at the 801 11th Avenue site, the existing auto dealership buildings would be leased to new tenants. The no action condition in 2029 is projected as the future baseline, and then the DeWitt Clinton Park North projects are added to this baseline and analyzed as the 2029 with action condition. Turning now to the with action condition, to ensure that the analyses consider the reasonable worst case environmental impacts, the EIS will analyze one of 2 with action scenarios depending on the technical area being studied. These include what we're referring to as either the maximum commercial scenario or the maximum residential scenario. Although the proposed projects would include auto dealership uses on the first 3 stories, this space could potentially be developed with other commercial uses as of right. Accordingly, in certain technical areas, the EIS will include an analysis of the maximum commercial scenario, which conservatively assumes a mix of commercial retail and office space on these floors. Doing so would disclose the potential for greater effects, for example, with respect to traffic. Alternatively, some of the commercial space in the building's base could be developed with additional residential units. Accordingly, in certain technical areas, the EIS will include an analysis of this maximum residential scenario, which could also produce greater effects, for example, with respect to school seats and publicly funded childcare facilities. For each technical area, the scenario that would result in the worst case environmental effects will be analyzed as the 2029 with action condition. As such, the draft scope of work specifies the scenario that will be assessed for each technical area. Finally, the increment between the no action condition and appropriate with action condition will be used to assess the effects of the projects and the potential for significant adverse environmental impacts. Next slide, please. This slide shows all of the technical areas that are proposed to be studied in the EIS. The draft scope provides the detailed methodology for each technical area identified on this list. As mentioned earlier, all of the analyses will be prepared in accordance with the CEQR technical manual guidance, and several city and state agencies will also be involved in the review of the EIS technical analyses. While all of these will be reviewed in the EIS, I will briefly describe some key areas of analysis. For open space resources, the EIS will include a detailed assessment of the indirect effects on public open space as a result of the project. The assessment will consider effects from new residential and worker populations at the development sites. This analysis will be conducted in coordination with the city's Parks Department. For the transportation chapter of the EIS, a travel demand analysis will be conducted to determine how many trips will be created by the project, providing the framework for the transportation analysis. The trip generation projections will be performed for the weekday AM, midday, PM, and Saturday peak periods. Based on the traffic projections, the travel demand analysis will identify intersections along streets to and from the development sites that will be analyzed during the peak hours. And a detailed analysis of traffic will be conducted at the intersections where most of the project-related trips are anticipated. For the transit analysis, the EIS will include a detailed analysis of any subway station, individual subway route, or bus lines identified in the travel demand analysis where the applicable CEQR technical manual threshold is exceeded. Pedestrian analyses will be conducted along key walking routes between the development sites and subway stations, bus stops, and other attractions in the study area. The EIS will also include a detailed analysis of parking to evaluate the off-site parking supply and utilization and its ability to accommodate the project's parking demand. The EIS will also consider the safety of all roadway users, including pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. In doing so, several transportation agencies will be involved in the review of the transportation analysis, including City DOT and the New York City Transit. For construction, a detailed analysis will be conducted, including quantitative assessments of the transportation network during construction and the potential impacts from construction noise and air emissions. There will be several chapters in the EIS that assess the effects of the new building forms, including urban design and visual resources and shadows. Specifically, the EIS will examine the compatibility of the project with the urban design and any visual resources found in the surrounding area. In terms of shadows, the EIS will examine potential shadow impacts on sunlight-sensitive resources, which include any important natural features, publicly accessible open spaces, or historic features that are sunlight dependent. When assessing bulk and building form for these technical areas, the EIS will analyze a maximum building envelope that would be permitted at each site. Where significant adverse impacts are identified, mitigation measures to reduce or eliminate the impacts to the fullest extent practicable will be developed and evaluated in a separate chapter of the EIS. Additionally, alternatives to the proposed projects will be identified and evaluated in the EIS so that decision makers may consider whether alternatives exist that would minimize or avoid adverse environmental effects while achieving the goals and objectives of the proposed projects. Consistent with CEQR, a no-action alternative will be considered. In addition, if any significant unmitigated adverse impacts are identified, a no unmitigated significant adverse impact alternative will also be considered, which would include an assessment of a project that would result in no unmitigated impacts. Finally, the EIS will include a chapter assessing the effects of potential project permutations. Once any mitigation requirements are identified as a result of the cumulative effects of the two proposed projects, this chapter will disclose how the effects would change if only one of the projects is ultimately built. This concludes the summary of the draft scope of work and the applicant team's presentation. We look forward to your comments on the draft scope of work. Thank you very much. And with that, I will now turn it back over to Stephanie Shalou of EARD. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. We will now move on to part 2 of the meeting, which time we will be receiving testimony from elected officials, people speaking on behalf of the community board and government agencies. Just as a reminder, when it's your turn to speak, your name will be called and you will be promoted to panelist. This will allow you to unmute your microphone and the ability to turn on your camera if you wish to do so. There will be a short period that it appears you're no longer in the meeting, but you will automatically rejoin the meeting as a panelist. If speakers experience technical issues that prevent you from sharing your testimony, we'll pause, troubleshoot in the background, and move on to our next speaker. We'll call you back if we're able to resolve any technical issues that are arising. Please remember that we do have how-to guides on the NYC Engage webpage for assistance. As noted on the bottom of the screen in red, if anyone is experiencing technical issues, you can either visit these how-to guides on NYC Engage website, or you can dial our dial-in participant hotline at 877-853-5247 and enter the meeting ID 618-237-7396. And when prompted for a password, dial 1, and you will receive one of our staff members for assistance. All right, we will go to our speakers in this first group. First, we have Council Member Gail Brewer. Council member, we will promote you to panelist in just a moment, and you will be given the opportunity to unmute and share your testimony. Hi, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be submitting for February 10th, but I wanted to just make a couple of comments. I do want to thank the folks who presented to you, also presented to me, and obviously I've done a lot of ULURPs in my life, so I am familiar with the process. Just a couple of things. I will be working with Community Board 4. It's a very sophisticated community board, and I look forward to working with them on this issue. I understand that in addition to cars, which I very much support because they are union jobs, both the salesman and the repair, but I think there's also an opportunity for some retail. So I'll be discussing that, I hope. The buildings are okay. They could be a little bit more interesting. They look like every glass and, that is, could be more interesting. I hope that is true. I want to know if they're passive house. That's something that's important to me. I have said this to the presenters before, but I don't want any shuttle buses. I will look forward in the environmental statement about shadows. And I'm not a big supporter of parking. I think that's not something that is discussable in the new city of Yes, but I want to understand that. And of course, my number one issue and Community Board 4's number one issue would be we understand exactly how much is available for affordable housing under MIH, but we would like more. And sometimes that means working with HPD, finding if their vouchers are possible, etc. But I will be pushing for more affordable housing, even though I know what the mandate is under the current program. So thank you very much. And I know also that there'll be the folks at Hudson River Park haven't actually determined exactly how much they want to transfer over. Certainly they want money for Pier 76. So I know that, and that's a very expensive pier, but that's still my understanding is under discussion. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember, for making time today and for providing your testimony. We will look forward to your written comments, which will be responded to in our final scope of work. Thank you for joining. Our next speaker in this group is Paul Devlin, who's speaking on behalf of the local community board. Paul Devlin, we will promote you to panelist at this time for you to join us and provide your testimony.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi,
Yes,
everyone.
welcome.
Thank you. And thank you to Councilmember Brewer for the compliments about Community Board 4, and I'll echo a lot of her concerns. I'm Paul Devlin, co-chair of the Clinton House Kitchen Land Use Committee of Community Board 4. I appreciate the time today holding this meeting and listening to our issues. We'll be submitting a longer, more detailed letter by February 10th, but I want to speak today to provide an overview of what to expect from us. CB4 has long been an advocate for working to find solutions to building more housing. We are not shy about supporting creative and innovative new housing in our district. In fact, a portion of this site is a component of our overall housing plan in which we call for thousands of new housing units. With that said, we are also highly protective of the current residents of our neighborhood who go to school here, who play, shop, and worship here, and who rely on this being a safe, secure area. We work hard to ensure that with all this new development, we maintain a livability factor. So here are a few issues we want to see addressed in the EIS. First and foremost, we'd like to see an alternative proposal studied of a development on these lots without added bonuses, meaning one that was not a receiving site of development rights from Hudson River Park, nor with the additional residential FAR. We need to understand the incremental difference of impacts between what could be built with a simple zoning change to a commercial zone versus what they plan to build as a receiving site with a 14 FAR. We have concerns about the proposed height of these buildings, shadows cast onto the river in the early parts of the days, and the creation of a series of tall buildings adjacent to the river is a pattern we work to avoid. We prefer more bulk and lower height, especially as buildings work west towards the river. We have concerns about the impact of thousands of new residents on our schools, parks, and playgrounds. This development is immediately north of DeWitt Clinton Park, which is currently in need of resources. Adding more families to this park needs to be better understood, and park improvements must be considered. We have concerns that this site is home to former car dealerships and repair shops exposed to generations of petroleum products and hazardous materials seeping from vehicles. This must be thoroughly studied and understood, especially given the site's proximity to the estuary and public green spaces. And of course, you all know we will be asking for a highly detailed analysis of the impacts on transportation, notably the use of sidewalks and bikeways, access to public transit, and vehicular congestion on our streets. We look forward to working with you and this development team to make sure the new housing built in our neighborhood enhances our neighborhood, doesn't negatively impact our current residents, and welcomes new residents into our vibrant community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony and for joining us today. And again, we'll look forward to receiving your written comments as well. Thank you very much. All right, with these two speakers, that was the end of those in the first group of speakers of elected officials, government agencies, and members speaking on behalf of the community board. So at this time, we will move to part 3 of the public scoping meeting, where we will invite members of the general public to speak. At this time, we'll also display our 3-minute time tracker at this time. Thank you very much. When it's your turn to speak again, you'll be promoted to panelist, will allow you to unmute your microphone and turn on your camera if you wish. We will ask folks to conclude their remarks when the 3 minutes have passed. And again, the instructions for how to participate, if anyone has technical concerns, is available on the NYC Engage webpage. All right, now we will turn to this group of speakers. The next speaker is Carlo Casa. Carlo, we will promote you to panelist at this time for you to provide your testimony. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Carlo Casa. I'm the Director of Policy and Research at the New York Building Congress. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The Building Congress represents over 500 constituent organizations and over 250,000 skilled tradespeople and professionals dedicated to the growth and prosperity of our city. We strongly express our support for the Friedland Properties and Chapman Group's DeWitt Clinton Park North mixed-use residential projects. These projects, a 42-story and a 38-story mixed-use residential building, are an essential step towards addressing our city's pressing housing crisis while creating significant economic and community benefits. Together, these developments would deliver nearly 2,000 much-needed residential units, including over 270 permanently affordable units. In doing so, they advance the City of Yes initiative's goals of expanding the supply of quality housing in transit-rich neighborhoods. Our city's housing crisis requires precisely this type of large-scale, thoughtfully conceived development that supports economic growth, generates hundreds of construction jobs, and will benefit local businesses. Notably, the project's $48 million air rights purchase from the Hudson River Park Trust will fund critically needed infrastructure improvements for Hudson River Park, which benefits all New Yorkers. We understand that the environmental review process may identify potential impacts that will require careful analysis and thoughtful mitigation measures. However, we are encouraged by the project team's record of responsible planning. As well-experienced firms, Friedland Properties and the Chapman Group are well equipped to address these environmental considerations while delivering high-quality buildings that integrate seamlessly into the existing fabric of the neighborhood. DeWitt Clinton Park North is a model for how projects can and should advance the creation of new housing and stimulate New York's economy. We are thrilled to support this project. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us and for providing your testimony. Of course, if you would like to submit this in writing, your testimony in writing as well, we will accept that also. Thank you. All right. At this time, this was the all of the speakers that had registered to speak at this meeting at this time. So we are going to see if anyone wishes to join by taking a 5-minute recess to allow anyone who may be watching our live stream on YouTube or who may not have been able to join at the beginning, who might be able to register to speak at this time. So we are now going to take approximately 5-minute recess to allow anyone who wishes to speak to register via NYC Engage. The information all shown on this screen will facilitate those who wish to register. So at this time, we will take a 5-minute pause and we will resume at approximately 2:43 p.m. Thanks, and speak with you all just in one moment, in 5 minutes. Good afternoon and welcome back. You are tuning into the remote public scoping meeting for the DeWitt Clinton Park North application located at 801 11th Avenue and 629 West 54th Street. Again, for the record, the city environmental quality review number is 25DCP049M. My name is Stephanie Shalou, Director of Environmental Assessment and Review Division here at the Department of City Planning. We are currently on part 3 of the public scoping meeting where members of the public are invited to testify on this item. We were on a 5-minute recess to allow anyone who had not yet registered to speak an opportunity to do so. During this break, we did not have any other speakers register to speak at this time. And so I will make a movement if anyone else wishes to speak on this matter at this time. And hearing none, we will move to close this public scoping meeting. If anyone had any difficulty providing testimony or wishes to provide testimony in writing, please recall that you can submit written testimony that will be received by us through Monday, February 10th at 5 p.m. And we also have the email address set up for this application, 25dcp049m_dl@planning.nyc.gov. or hard mailed to us at the New York City Department of City Planning. Attention, myself, Stephanie Shalou, at 120 Broadway, 31st floor, New York, New York, 10271. Please get us your comments by February 10th by 5 p.m. And we look forward to receiving your comments. The time is now 2:45 p.m. and this public scoping meeting is now closed. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.